On the quiet Sunday morning of December 7th, 1941, life was calm on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. Sailors and soldiers stationed at Pearl Harbor were going about their routines, unaware that the world was about to change in a matter of minutes. Just after sunrise, hundreds of Japanese warplanes descended from the sky, unleashing a surprise attack on the heart of America's Pacific Fleet. In less than 2 hours, chaos and devastation would overwhelm Pearl Harbor, and the United States would be thrust into World War II. The attack wasn't just another battle. It was a calculated, daring move that took the US completely by surprise. But what had driven Japan to risk such a bold maneuver? For years, tensions had simmered between the United States and Japan, as each viewed the other as a growing threat in the Pacific. Japan's ambition to expand its empire throughout Asia had led the US to respond with sanctions, cutting off vital resources like oil. With tensions escalating, Japanese leaders began formulating a plan to neutralize American influence in the region. The stakes couldn't have been higher. For Japan, Pearl Harbor represented a chance to disable the US Navy, giving them free rein to expand unchecked across Southeast Asia. For America, it shattered any hope of remaining neutral. This was the spark that would ignite a massive war effort and alter the course of World War II. But how did Japan manage to execute such a devastating attack against one of America's most fortified naval bases? What were the immediate reactions, both on the ground and across the United States? And what was the long-term impact of that fateful day? This is the story of the surprise attack that changed the world forever. A day President Franklin D. Roosevelt would call a date which will live in infamy. In the years leading up to Pearl Harbor, tensions between Japan and the United States steadily rose. Japan, an island nation with limited resources, aimed to expand its influence across Asia, establishing a self-sufficient empire known as the Greater East Asia Prosperity Sphere. But as Japan's empire grew, it increasingly clashed with American interests in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. The conflict intensified after Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and the outbreak of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. Public opinion in the United States turned against Japan, and in response, the US imposed economic sanctions, restricting exports of essential resources. The tipping point came in July 1941, when President Roosevelt froze Japanese assets in the US and enacted a full oil embargo. Without oil, Japan's military capabilities were severely threatened. For Japan, the embargo was an existential threat. Faced with dwindling supplies, Japanese leaders saw two options: withdraw from their conquests or secure their own oil by force. Unwilling to abandon their ambitions, they saw war with the United States as inevitable and began planning a strategy to disable America's Pacific Fleet with a surprise attack. Japan's leaders knew they couldn't win a prolonged war against the US. Their hope was that a swift, decisive strike would cripple America's ability to respond, forcing the US to negotiate on terms favorable to Japan. Pearl Harbor, the base of the US Pacific Fleet, was chosen as the target, both a strategic stronghold and a symbol of American naval power. The attack was meticulously planned by Japanese strategists led by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Yamamoto understood the risks, but believed a surprise strike was Japan's best hope for a quick victory in the Pacific. He famously warned, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant." Still, Japan moved forward, determined to prevent American interference in its expansion. The Japanese fleet, consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, 353 planes, and a support fleet, embarked on a 3,000-mile journey across the Pacific, maintaining radio silence to avoid detection. Their objective was to approach Hawaii undetected and launch a surprise air assault at dawn on December 7, 1941. Japan's primary targets were the 8 American battleships stationed at Pearl Harbor, along with the airfields supporting the fleet. The goal was to sink or disable these ships, crippling the U.S. Navy's power in the Pacific. If successful, the attack would give Japan a 6-month window to expand southward without fear of American retaliation. As the fleet neared striking distance, Japanese submarines began scouting the harbor. At 6 a.m. on December 7th, the first wave of Japanese planes took off, including bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters. In just a few hours, the skies over Pearl Harbor would be filled with hundreds of Japanese aircraft, catching the U.S. forces completely off guard. At 7:48 a.m. on December 7th, 1941, the calm morning at Pearl Harbor was shattered. The first wave of Japanese planes descended upon the harbor, engines roaring as they began their assault. The surprise was complete. American forces were caught entirely off guard. Within minutes, explosions ripped through the naval base as torpedoes and bombs struck battleships and airfields. The devastation was immediate. Battleships like the USS Arizona and USS Oklahoma took direct hits. The USS Arizona, struck by a bomb that detonated its ammunition magazine, exploded in a fireball, sinking almost instantly and killing over 1,100 crew members. The USS Oklahoma was hit multiple times, capsizing and trapping hundreds of sailors inside. Chaos overtook the harbor as sailors scrambled to defend their ships and rescue their comrades. The first wave lasted just under an hour, but a second wave quickly followed. Japanese bombers continued their assault on the airfields, ensuring that American planes were destroyed on the ground before they could take off. Nearly every battleship in the harbor was damaged or destroyed, along with dozens of aircraft lost on the airstrips. Amid the chaos, U.S. personnel mounted a defense as best they could. Anti-aircraft guns roared to life, and a few brave pilots managed to get airborne, engaging the enemy despite overwhelming odds. Yet the damage was done. In less than 2 hours, the Japanese had inflicted massive losses. 8 battleships damaged or destroyed, 3 cruisers and 4 destroyers incapacitated, nearly 200 aircraft lost, and over 2,400 Americans killed. For Americans across the country, the shock was profound. News of the attack spread quickly, and images of burning battleships became symbols of the devastation. President Roosevelt soon addressed the nation, calling December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Pearl Harbor was not only a military tragedy, but a blow to the American spirit, uniting the country as never before. The attack on Pearl Harbor ignited a fury and resolve that would change the course of history. On December 8, 1941, the day after the attack, President Roosevelt addressed Congress and the nation, stirring a sense of unity and purpose among Americans. The decision was clear. The United States would enter World War II. Congress responded swiftly, declaring war on Japan with only one dissenting vote. Days later, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies, declared war on the United States, making America a full participant in the global conflict. The US mobilized quickly, channeling its vast industrial power into building tanks, planes, ships, and weapons. Factories that once produced consumer goods were repurposed for war, and millions of Americans enlisted, ready to join the fight. The attack on Pearl Harbor also reshaped America's foreign policy. Once committed to isolationism, the United States now took on a leading role in the Allied war effort. American troops were deployed to the Pacific, North Africa, and eventually Europe, joining battles that would lead to the defeat of the Axis powers. Pearl Harbor became a rallying point, a symbol of the need to defend freedom and resist tyranny. In a matter of days, the United States transformed from a nation on the sidelines to a global military power determined to defeat fascism. The attack had indeed awakened a sleeping giant, and the course of the war was forever changed. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a turning point in World War II, one that altered the trajectory of both the war and the United States itself. What began as a calculated strike by Japan to cripple the US Pacific Fleet ultimately led to America's full commitment to the Allied cause. Pearl Harbor became a defining moment, a rallying cry that united Americans and fueled a massive war effort. The events of December 7, 1941, reminded the world that no nation, however isolated it may wish to be, could remain untouched by global conflict. The Day of Infamy awakened the United States to its role as a defender of freedom, leading to its emergence as a global superpower. In the years that followed, American forces fought across Europe and the Pacific, contributing to the downfall of the Axis powers and securing a hard-won victory. Today, Pearl Harbor stands as a testament to the courage of those who defended their country in its darkest hour, and as a lesson in the cost of vigilance and preparedness. It reminds us that freedom often comes at a high price, one paid by those willing to defend it. If you found this story of Pearl Harbor compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of history's pivotal moments and the legacies they left behind.